Nickelodeon's original concept was created by Dr. Vivian Horner, the director of research of the PBS series The Electric Company. An educator in her own right, she first created the show Pinwheel, which premiered on December 1st, 1977, as part of the QUBE local cable television system that launched in Columbus, Ohio by Warner Cable. C3, one of the 10 community channels offered by the service, exclusively broadcasted Pinwheel every day from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. before the channel would then eventually be taken over by the Star Channel, or would be later known the Movie Channel. On April 1st, 1979, Nickelodeon officially launched on Warner Cable franchises across the country and included programming such as Pinwheel, Video Comic Book, America Goes Bananas, Flix, and By the Way. Sandy Kavanaugh, one of the producers of Pinwheel, actually proposed the name Nickelodeon for the new channel, and although she wasn't a fan of it at first, knew that it sounded whimsical. And by 1984, Nickelodeon would be operating at a loss of $10 million, although it was known to be a loss leader for the service because, unlike other television channels, Nickelodeon didn't have advertising for it to make money off of. But by then, MTV Network's president Bob Pittman turned to Fred Seibert and Alan Goodman after they created MTV's iconic interludes from years earlier, were tasked to reinvigorate Nickelodeon for a new age. Fred and Alan, with the help of the advertising firm Corey McPherson and Nash, helped to relaunch and invigorate Nickelodeon on October 1st, 1984, which included all of the very iconic orange splat logos, and of course the classic doo-wop IDs that interplayed throughout the channel throughout the late 80s and 90s, and pretty much are still used to this day in various forms. On August 11th, 1991, Nickelodeon debuted the Nicktoons brand with 3 completely original animated shows, Doug, Rugrats, and Ren and Stimpy. 3 shows that would help pave the way for Nickelodeon's continuing success throughout the 90s and beyond, which is where I come in. My name is Captain Eric, and I am your curator through This Week in Nickelodeon History, a show that originally started as a segment on a podcast I also produce called I'm Ready, a Spongebob Squarecast. It started out as a quick segment there as a way to talk about other Nickelodeon properties other than SpongeBob, who, although is my favorite Nicktoon, I do love a lot of other Nickelodeon shows and content, and what started out as a small segment quickly then took over the Squarecast show. So after a few episodes of that as just a segment, This Week in Nickelodeon History was then eventually rebranded as its own separate show, but remained on the initial audio feed for I'm Ready, a Spongebob Squarecast up until its 52nd episode, in which I decided to just completely remove the show after a full year of episodes into its own podcast feed. Now, also alongside giving it its own podcast feed, I decided to evolve the show a little bit so that each and every year doesn't just feel like we're doing the same thing all over again. I've talked about every single show that premiered or ended on Nickelodeon, Noggin, Teen Nick, Nicktoons Network, any of the movies that came out for Nickelodeon Movies, and so on and so forth. So for each and every year of this show, I do plan on adding something new to it to just spice it up. It's not always going to be the same conversations all over again. I'm not interested in re-recording the same show year after year. So for this year of This Week in Nickelodeon History, for the next 52 episodes, I decided to condense things a little bit down to the main Nickelodeon channel. I won't be featuring any shows that premiered outside of the main Nickelodeon channel. So the channels of Noggin, Teen Nick, the Nicktoons Network, all of the sister channels are unfortunately going to be left by the wayside, at least for a year, until things maybe need to be changed up again. So, all of the shows I'm going to be covering premiered or ended on the main Nickelodeon channel. That does include segments from Nick Jr. and Nick at Night, because those are still on the same channel there. On top of the television channel, I still will be talking about Nickelodeon movies, but this year a new addition will be birthdays and Nickelodeon video games. So I will also be covering some main birthdays of some big Nickelodeon players that may be well known or not well known to you, and I also will be covering the Nickelodeon video games that have released throughout the years for various consoles. And on top of all of that, we have a brand new email address that you can write to the show to, NickelodeonHistory@gmail.com, as simple as you can get of an email address. I may be opening up a snail mailbag of sorts for this show. If you ever have questions or comments about Nickelodeon, I would love to read those on the air and feature a little segment for any Nickelodeon fans out there who might want to say something about the show, ask me any questions about Nickelodeon history, ask me any questions about my own history, or anything you see fit. So NickelodeonHistory@gmail.com. You can send all of your questions or comments right then and there. And one last thing that has been added to the show this year is that every week I will have a top 5 at the end of, once we go through all of the history segments, there will be a top 5 at the end, a Captain Eric top 5, and it'll be usually based off of something we're talking about that week. There will always be some sort of twist, whether or not it has something to do with a holiday coming up, a Nickelodeon anniversary, or just something else happening in the world. There will be a top 5. I always like talking about the things that I enjoy, the reasons why I enjoy them. It might give somebody a reason as to why to check it out. So for this week's episode, since it is the launch of Nickelodeon, the launch of this new season of This Week in Nickelodeon History, this week's top 5 is going to be my top 5 Nickelodeon shows. Bar none, my top 5 Nickelodeon shows. So if you're interested in checking that out, you can at the end of this episode. And this week, we're starting with 43 years ago. On April 1st, 1979, we had the premieres of Flix, By the Way, and America Goes Bananas. Now, as mentioned earlier, these were 3 of the shows that launched alongside Nickelodeon. And if you're a fan of this show, of this podcast in particular, then you would know that throughout the last year, I pretty much started with the newest properties and ended with the oldest ones. This year, I'm just going to go in reverse because some of the older ones I don't have a lot of recollection of, certainly like these 3. And it's kind of weird to end a show with properties that I can't even really watch. It's not like these things are easily accessible through Paramount Plus, but to give you an idea on all 3 of these shows, Flix was executive produced by Bill Riley, and it was a TV series which consisted of cliffhanger serials from the 1920s to 1940s. Now, for those that don't know what those are, or what like the serials are of the olden times, back before televisions, when movie theaters were pretty much the only place that you can go and watch things on a screen, movie theaters would usually be running throughout the day, and it wasn't like a certain time that you would go in, watch a movie for 90 minutes, and then kind of walk out. You would pay to just sit in the theater. So if there were cartoons or news airing, you would just watch whatever they were airing on that screen. So you would pay to walk in, and you'd go and watch stuff. Now, I'm sure they had scheduled events, but these serials at the time were kind of airing, throughout different times throughout the day. And the reason why they were cliffhangers, where they wanted you to, obviously want to know what happens next so that you return back to that theater the next month or whenever they would have that next short. So it would just kind of keep you on the edge of your seat, just like how television shows now have cliffhanger endings where they want you to tune in next week to figure out what happens. It's that same mentality, but on a bigger scale. It's not just having you turn on your television and turn on that channel. It's literally, hey, if you want to see what happens next, you have to leave your house and come check this thing out. So Flix was a compilation of sorts of all of these different serials and films that included The Galloping Ghost, The Whispering Shadow, starring Bela Lugosi, which it's really cool to know that Bela Lugosi, Dracula himself, was on Nickelodeon, The Mystery Squadron, and Junior G-Men. This is certainly, one of those television shows that are just, it's there for historical purposes, but I don't think you really need to go out of your way to find any of the Flicks. By the Way, which is also celebrating 43 years ago, also premiered on April 1st, 1979, and is a program which features various segments of animated and live-action shorts. And finally, one of the biggest shows to have aired at this time, America Goes Bananas, a teenage-oriented variety show presented by Michael Young and created by Bert Dubrow. Now, if you remember when I first talked about Nickelodeon starting in 1977 as part of the Cube network, or the QUBE, over in Columbus, alongside that on C1, Nickelodeon was on C3, but on C1, this show was originally known as Columbus Goes Bananas and was clearly just more oriented to the Columbus area. So when Nickelodeon was going to launch nationally, they decided to take Columbus Goes Bananas and change it to America Goes Bananas and launch it alongside the channel, which I think is an absolutely good idea. Taking, if they just aired it as Columbus Goes Bananas, I mean, you're on a national network. I don't know how many people would turn out just to see everybody in Columbus go bananas, but hey, when you're going to expand it to all of America, now we're talking here. Two things about America Goes Bananas. In 1980, the Warner Amex Satellite Entertainment Group received an Excellence in Entertainment Award for the National Cable and Telecommunications Association for America Goes Bananas. And later that same year, the series received the ACE Award for Best Entertainment Program. The show lasted from December 1st, 1977, going all the way until 1980. There's not too much information to find about this next show, but 41 years ago, on March 31st, 1981, Hocus Focus apparently finished its run on Nickelodeon. A interesting show about a young wizard, an apprentice wizard named Crispin Quester. The show ran for one season on the network, and there is just so little information about this show that I have to just go by what I can find. I know that it exists. There's some video of it, but even including when it started, when it ended, it's a little bit hard. But here's what I can say. The show starred Brad Williams and Jim Jenkins. Jim Jenkins, who would go on to create the television show Doug for Nickelodeon, which, there you go, a little extra piece of Nickelodeon history for you. Also celebrating a 41-year-old anniversary this year, 41 years ago on March 31st, 1981, we also had the final episode of Pop Clips. Now, Pop Clips was a music video television program and is the direct predecessor of MTV music television. So they had Pop Clips airing on Nickelodeon through 1980 into 1981. And at the time, Warner Cable wanted to buy the name and idea of Pop Clips, but instead just decided to water down the idea and create MTV off of that. Now, MTV would then trail its own path off of this, but it's really interesting to know that a channel as far removed from Nickelodeon as you could get has its early beginnings here on this channel. I obviously think MTV was one of the smartest ideas ever. People might not think that just airing music videos 24 hours a day is going to get that many people watching, but you were mistaken if you thought that, because, man, I mean, the music videos just got more and more intense, and MTV just got more and more popular. Now, this wouldn't be the last time that music videos were aired alongside Nickelodeon. Eventually, in 1984, they would kind of retool this concept into Nick Rocks, just another program designed to air music videos on Nickelodeon. And as far as I know, Nick Rocks would be the last kind of big push for a music video-centric television show on Nickelodeon. I could be wrong, and there could be newer items that push more music videos than anything else, but just to have a TRL type of show on Nickelodeon, I think that was the last one. But yeah, 41 years ago, Pop Clips, the start of MTV. 37 years ago, on March 31st, 1985, Reggie Jackson's World of Sports finished its run on Nickelodeon. There was only one season of Reggie Jackson's World of Sports, and it ran for 18 episodes. It ran between 1981 until 1985 and included a bunch of sporting activities for kids, and Reggie Jackson, one of the world's biggest baseball players of all time, talking about those activities, and then also ways to take care of your health. I think it was a smart idea to partner up with Reggie for a show like this for kids, which to this day would still be something that Nickelodeon does when they partner up with certain sports celebrities such as Rob Gronkowski to host shows on Nickelodeon. So this practice, all the way done back in 1981, still being done here in 2022 on Nickelodeon. So shout out to Reggie Jackson, who in his career hit 563 Home Runs was an American League All-Star for 14 seasons, won 2 Silver Slugger Awards, was the AL Most Valuable Player in 1973, won 2 World Series MVP awards, and the Babe Ruth Award in 1977. And just so you know, the Yankees and Athletics retired his team uniform number in both 1993 and 2004, respectively. 30 years ago, on May 31st, 1992, the Nick Hit List finished its run on Nickelodeon. No, this is not a television channel going over all of the individuals that Nickelodeon wouldn't want around anymore. This is actually a television series going over today's music and movies, but from the mouths and opinions of children. So it gives kids the voice to tell you what they like, what they don't like, and so on and so forth. This show ran from November 1st, 1991 until May 31st, 1992. 28 years ago, on April 1st, 1994, Rocco's Modern Life, Spunky's Dangerous Day, released for the Super Nintendo. The very first and only video game for the Rocco's Modern Life television show. Spunky's Dangerous Day is a unique game that if you honestly have no idea about, you're going to be a little bit lost, but instead of it being a normal platformer, as you would expect, as almost every other Nickelodeon release from a Nicktoon was at this time, Spunky's Dangerous Day is actually a puzzle game of sorts where your entire goal is to get Spunky from the beginning of the level to the end of the level without getting hurt, which means through the use of various characters and objects that you can find as Rocco, your job is to just keep Spunky out of harm's way by manipulating the level around him, because Spunky is one of those characters that just can't stop or do anything to help his situation. It's essentially escort missions. It's a series of puzzle escort missions where you're playing as Rocco and you're saving Spunky. I actually enjoy the game once you can get past that it's not a platformer and you're going to be, solving more puzzles than simply just getting from point A to point B. You can enjoy this game on an entirely different level. If you can track a copy down, I do think it's worth owning, but since it is not readily available on any discernible service, I also can say emulation is reasonable to try out a game like this. But Rocco's Modern Life, Spunky's Dangerous Day. 30 years ago, on March 30th, 2001, The Fairly Oddparents premiered on Nickelodeon. Created by Butch Hartman, the show ran for 10 seasons of 172 episodes. One of Nickelodeon's longest-running television shows, The Fairly Oddparents is also one of their most popular. I believe it is this week that even their sequel series, the live-action reboot series, The Fairly Oddparents Fairly Odder, is premiering on Paramount Plus. Not sponsored. Hashtag not sponsored. But The Fairly Oddparents is just certainly one of those shows that once you know about it, once it is in your consciousness, you will never be able to see green and pink objects sitting next to each other without thinking of Cosmo and Wanda. The Fairly Oddparents actually have their start on Nickelodeon before the official series premiere in 2001, as they were a part of a few short films on Oh Yeah Cartoons, which aired on Nickelodeon from September 4th, 1998 until March 23rd, 2001. It's not at all unfair to say that the Fairly Oddparents were basically the mascots of Oh Yeah Cartoons. They were definitely the most popular shorts, right alongside Chalk Zone, but it was immediately clear that they had a lot of support behind the Fairly Oddparents because it just simply got the most shorts out of any other concept, and when it was announced as its own show, it was just obvious, like, yes, this was the one thing from Oh Yeah Cartoons that almost everybody universally loved, and here we have this show that just blew up in popularity. And although the Fairly Oddparents at one point was neck and neck in popularity with Spongebob Squarepants, it really never felt like it hit that next level of popularity, which would be the merchandising aspect. And although there were very early Fairly Oddparents merchandise efforts in stores, it never got the same level of push that both the Rugrats and SpongeBob did. At least as a kid growing up at that time, it certainly never felt that way. Now, on the same exact day, March 30th, 2001, Invader Zim, 31 years ago, also premiered on Nickelodeon. Created by Jonan Vasquez, the show ran for 2 seasons of 27 episodes. Now, when I say that Invader Zim is one of the most infamous, if not the most infamous Nicktoon in history, I'm saying it as a compliment. as Invader Zim was completely ahead of its time in terms of just design, content, and had a unique voice that has pretty much been said once on Nickelodeon and has not been said ever since. It's a voice we just got to hear for only a handful of episodes before it was taken off of the channel. Invader Zim, created by Jonan Vasquez, who is well known for his comic books, Johnny the Homicidal Maniac and Squee, a spin-off of that, was then tasked by Nickelodeon to create an animated property. They found someone with a unique voice and said, let's make a unique cartoon. That's pretty much the philosophy of Nickelodeon from its infancy of the Nicktoons. Creator-driven animated content. Give the creator a voice, let him echo that voice through an animated property and see what they come up with. And trust me, if hearing the name Johnny the Homicidal Maniac should give you any sort of clue as to what Jonan would bring to the table with Invader Zim, you have no idea. Or you might have a slight idea. But Invader Zim is completely unique. It's a one-of-a-kind show. And although it was prematurely canceled on the network, its popularity grew and grew throughout the years, and I would say is Nickelodeon's biggest cult show in its history. To have a show that has endured popularity when there's just the smallest amount of episodes that have aired on television, and to just see it continuing on is absolutely crazy. To give you just the smallest amount of history here, Invader Zim was prematurely canceled when its only Season 2 episode to air on the Nickelodeon channel aired on December 2nd, 2002 with the most horrible Xmas ever. The rest of the episodes of Season 2 wouldn't air until 2006 when they started airing them on the Nicktoons network to massive ratings for the channel, which records that may still stand to this day. I'm not entirely sure about that one, but I know that those records were just astronomical. Now, those episodes did release with the rest of the complete series DVD set, I think a year or two beforehand, before they aired on the Nicktoons network. So those were out in the consciousness, but those were only going to be purchased by the real elite Invader Zim fans who were going to purchase that box set. Now, after the airings of the new episodes on the Nicktoons network, that, alongside the massive profit that the show is still making through merchandise sold at Hot Topic stores exclusively, Nickelodeon then decided to re-release the show on another DVD to kind of gauge more interest, although in my honest opinion at that point they didn't really need to gauge any more interest. They had all the factors that they needed to create more Invader Zim content, but that DVD did sell well. But then of course the project of more Zim would not continue on. Jonah Vasquez would mention that they just thought it was going to be too expensive, until 2017 when Nickelodeon would finally announce a television film return of Invader Zim. Invader Zim Enter the Florpus, which would then be sold to Netflix and premiere on August 16th, 2019. And that is the Invader Zim story. It's a very short and sweet run of a show. If you've never seen Invader Zim, it is 27 episodes long. It is a very quick and easy watch, and Enter the Florpus is an absolutely wonderful finale of sorts. And I can't say much more good about it other than I kind of wish Nickelodeon went down these more devilish paths of animation. Not that they necessarily have to be super adult, but just those cartoons that are certainly for kids, but definitely those cartoons that maybe some parents wouldn't watch. Those dangerous levels of Nickelodeon. There were certainly parents back in the 90s when, Nickelodeon was more kind of like fart jokes and little gross out humor. There were parents who didn't want their kids watching that network. And then when Invader Zim came along and set that bar to an entirely new level of what they would expect, and I wish they would just go down that well a little bit more. But without that, it still makes Invader Zim stand out among the pack as a one-of-a-kind Nicktoon. Totally glad it exists. I'm glad it's here. And if you've never seen Invader Zim, it is absolutely worth checking out. I can't recommend it enough. Certainly my pick of the week in terms of something you should check out of something I'm covering. 15 years ago, on March 29th, 2007, Blues Room finished its run on Nickelodeon. Created by Tracy Page Johnson and Angela Santomero, the show ran for 2 seasons of 17 episodes. A spin-off of Blue's Clues, Blues Room takes the titular character of Blue and sends her into an entirely new world, a real world, where Blue goes from a 2D animated puppy into a 3D talking puppet. She would then eventually be joined by Joe, who I don't know why that wouldn't be more weird for him to go from like a world where everything around him is two-dimensional into this puppet world. I don't know. But eventually the one-time special for Blue's Clues would then spin off into Blue's Room, where they would take the new cast of characters, new puppet friends, and of course Blue now being able to talk to the viewer into new adventures. Of course, now it's kind of like Sesame Street meets Blue's Clues. It's a smart move. The puppet for Blue looked really good. I wasn't really a fan of the voice or the idea of Blue talking, because that's not what that character was meant to do or meant for. I like when Blue is just a non-speaking character, because Blue would emote more than just for talking, you know. And also just the idea of like going from the scavenger hunt type show to just a straight up puppet show. But hey, look, I was definitely out of its demographic by the time this aired, and my younger brother, though, pretty much was the right age for when Blue's Room was airing, and he was a big fan of Blue's Clues and Blue's Room. I don't know which one he really preferred. He would probably tell you Blue's Clues. I don't think many kids at this time could say they really preferred Blue's Room more, unless you just enjoy puppetry more, which I absolutely respect that. If you've never seen Blue's Room, I'd at least say it's worth checking Blue's voice out if you've never heard that. Other than that, it's really hard to recommend unless you have preschoolers around, which, hey, then absolutely put that thing on. It's probably worth checking out for them. 14 years ago, on March 29th, 2008, Dance on Sunset premiered on Nickelodeon. Created by Brian Leder and Frederick Levy, the show ran for one season of 12 episodes. 12 years ago, on March 27th, 2012, Victorious premiered on Nickelodeon. Created by Dan Schneider, the show ran for 4 seasons of 57 episodes. Now, when it comes to the man himself and any of the allegations that have been made against him, unless something is ever fully concrete, I don't ever want to make judgment on somebody on this show. But when it comes to this gentleman, he does have a long-standing working relationship with Nickelodeon, and his name does get brought up throughout the year. But from this point forward, instead of mentioning his name, I usually just mention that these shows were baked out of the Schneider Bakery, which is his production company used for most of these projects. So for other than the first time of mentioning his name, any other times throughout the year that I happen to mention any of these projects, they would have been baked from the Schneider Bakery. This one is one of their biggest shows ever, Victorious, starring Victoria Justice as the titular character of Tori Vega attending Hollywood Arts Performing High School. A television show about a performing arts school, that might not be that good. Oh wait, it in fact is one of their best comedic shows that I've ever seen. It certainly was almost like an age-up project from the bakery, which usually had sitcoms aimed more towards the younger mind, and it just felt like Victorious were aimed more towards the high school and older demographic. And I gotta say that it was during the time that I stopped having Nickelodeon as a full-time cable network. I moved to a new home, and then unfortunately decided I was only going to pay for internet, which means, hey, Nickelodeon is not really a part of my daily routine. And to be completely fair, around this time I was really not watching all of the regular programming on Nickelodeon. I kind of aged out of it a little bit, and you know, I kept it on in the background once in a while when there was like a SpongeBob marathon, but Victorious was one of those shows that I actually checked out, and it was legitimately funny. There were some good jokes in there. And I became a pretty solid fan of the show. I fell in love with their characters. I fell in love with the setting they created. And I gotta say, the character of Mr. Sikowitz, the main teacher of the show, the dynamic that he has with the kids, you know, there's always those sitcoms where the characters are friends, but you can tell that they're more friends than anyone else in the class with the teacher, kind of that Mr. Feeney type of relationship from Boy Meets World. And Sikowitz is like a new age Mr. Feeney here. The relationship he has with the kids is incredibly endearing. And even though like he's giving more attention to this like one section of his class, it's believable in that way. And I don't know, fell in love with the show. It's absolutely worth a watch. Check out Victorious. I believe it is on Netflix right now. It'll eventually make its way over to Paramount Plus. But if you've never seen it, it is worth your time. 7 years ago, on March 28th, 2015, Harvey Beaks premiered on Nickelodeon. Created by C.H. Greenblatt, the show ran for 2 seasons of 52 episodes. I unfortunately have not gotten into Harvey Beaks yet, but it is one of those shows that is on the docket. One of these days, I'm going to dive right into it. I absolutely love the work of C.H. Greenblatt. The work he produced on Spongebob Squarepants, his work on his television show Chowder is one of the best that have been produced at Cartoon Network, in my opinion. And then to just see him being treated the way he was in Harvey Beaks here is, it's one thing to get the Nicktoon, but it's really disheartening to see the way it was handled by the end. Harvey Beaks became one of many shows where, by its second season, if the show just didn't hit a certain level or threshold of popularity that Nickelodeon was looking for, it just got moved over to the Nicktoons Network, which is Nickelodeon's sister channel that airs on other various expanded cable networks. You might have Nickelodeon, but not have Nicktoons Network where you are. Now, the Nicktoons Network does mainly air Nicktoons, although they do air other animated properties from around the world, usually for the first time under the Nickelodeon banner. Shows even like Dragon Ball Kai. If you've never heard of that one, a kind of re-edited version of Dragon Ball Z that aired on the Nicktoons Network. But yeah, they would eventually take a lot of these Nicktoons after a season or two and just kind of slowly move all the rest of the new episodes over to the Nicktoons Network, copying kind of what happened with Invader Zim there, where new episodes were just getting massive ratings for that channel. So now, they always need new content to get the ratings up, but it's unfortunate to see a lot of these shows that possibly had potential if they were just given the right kind of attention, just kind of tossed to the side. But Harvey Beaks, I've heard many good things about, and I hope to enjoy it when I do dive down to it one day. I really do enjoy the work of C.H. Greenblatt. He is just one of the best minds in animation, so I have to imagine this is worth checking out in some regard. 6 years ago, on March 31st, 2016, Max and Shred finished its run on Nickelodeon. Created by Josh Greenbaum and Ben McMillan, the show ran for 2 seasons of 34 episodes. 4 years ago, on March 31st, 2018, Star Falls premiered on Nickelodeon. Created by George Doty IV, the show ran for 1 season of 20 episodes. 2 years ago, on March 27th, 2020, the American adaptation of The Crystal Maze finished its run on Nickelodeon. The show was hosted by comedian Adam Conover and ran for 10 episodes on the network. 2 years ago, on March 28th, 2020, Danger Force premiered on Nickelodeon. A spin-off of Henry Danger, the show was created by Christopher J. Nowak, Dana Olson, and was another production baked out of the Schneider Bakery. The show is still ongoing of the network and is currently in its second season and with a running of 40 episodes. Taking the character of Captain Man, the main superhero of the show, Henry Danger, that character would then continue on his superhero work alongside his inventor and assistant Schwaz, but then taking on the tutelage of 4 young superheroes, Choppa, Miles, Mika, and Bose, 4 heroes who each have their own ability and collectively are known as the Danger Force. This is just a no-brainer of a spin-off. Henry Danger was a massive show for Nickelodeon, and given that one of the characters, played by Cooper Barnes, is still an adult, is still ongoing, is still a crime fighter, it was just a no-brainer to take that character and continue him with a whole new crop of kids. And that's something they could even do beyond Danger Force. If these 4 children eventually grow out, as Henry eventually did, they could still keep Captain Man going as an ongoing character on Nickelodeon. Like, it's just a no-brainer to keep that superhero alive, and I don't know how much Cooper is still enjoying playing that character after all this time, but if he is still enjoying it, even after another few years of playing Captain Man, then I say just keep the Danger properties moving forward. I don't watch them at all, but I appreciate the work that they've put into them, the effort. I'm a big superhero fan myself, so I'm super happy that one of their biggest properties is a superhero property. I really like that. 1 year ago, on April 2nd, 2021, Camp Coral, SpongeBob's Underyears premiered on Nickelodeon. The show originally premiered on March 4th, 2021 as a Paramount Plus exclusive, but this show did get its start originally announced as a Nickelodeon show. It is a spin-off of the Spongebob Squarepants show and has all of our titular characters as younger versions of themselves attending Camp Coral, the camp that was first shown in the third Spongebob Squarepants movie, Sponge on the Run. Camp Coral in that movie is designed to show us a few different stories that may have happened for these characters when they were young, where they first kind of interacted with SpongeBob and how important he is to their lives. That then idea would be spun off into this show, where it is still CG animation but takes a different look than what the movie did and just has continuing adventures the following summer from Sponge on the Run. There is actual canon now in SpongeBob SquarePants, to the point that there is even a scene in this show that connects it to the original SpongeBob show and answers some of the world's most dying questions, as how could SpongeBob not know Sandy in the second episode of the show when he attended Camp Coral with her? And that question is, of course, eventually answered in Camp Coral itself. But I gotta be honest, for as angry as people were when this was originally announced, and trust me, I have talked in nauseum of my feelings about that. In fact, I will post the episode in question in which I cover my thoughts on Camp Coral, Steven Hillenburg, and the Sponge on the Run movie in the podcast description if you want to check out any of my thoughts on that. But in a nutshell, for as disrespectful as people said this was, when you actually lay everything out, everything surrounding Camp Coral seemed to be fine, and it's just good knowing that there are more animators out there that get to work on SpongeBob SquarePants, more writers who get to work on this show, bring more stories of these characters to life, and help entertain an entirely new generation of kids. I mean, look, this is something that if they weren't going to do it in the 2020s, they were going to do this in the 2030s or 40s. Eventually, they were going to do a younger version of SpongeBob, and you know what? Honestly, for some of the episodes I have seen, it's not that bad of a show. There are jokes that have genuinely made me laugh, and there's ideas about the show that I say, like, hey, that's a pretty good idea. Do I enjoy everything about the show? Absolutely not. There really isn't anything that I would say I 100% dislike about the show, but it is serviceable, it's worth checking out, and there are some genuinely funny moments in this show, so don't be so close-minded. Check out Camp Coral if you have a chance, if you happen to have a Paramount Plus subscription. Also premiering a year ago on April 2nd, 2021, The Barbarian and the Troll, created by Mike Mitchell and Drew Massey. The show, still in its first season, has a running of 13 episodes. What is notable about this show, it is another Nickelodeon attempt at a puppet show. Before this, the only other show I could remember that dealt with puppets was Mr. Meaty, and I'm glad to see them continue some sort of puppetry trend. Now, don't think that this show has anything to do with Mr. Meaty. Trust me, it's not. I have not seen the show, so I can't say it's not as gross as Mr. Meaty, but at least in the trailers or any of the videos I've seen of the show, it doesn't seem to be going to that same level of gross out humor, or really any gross out humor. But I do have an appreciation for puppets. I think they're highly underappreciated in our society, and it's just nice to see that there's more attempts for puppetry shows to continue on. So whether or not this show is good or bad, the fact that it is another attempt with puppets on Nickelodeon, I dig it. So I might check it out one day. If you're a fan of The Barbarian and the Troll, definitely sound off in the comments and let me know what you think. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is This Week in Nickelodeon History. And now it is time for Captain Eric's Top 5. This week's Top 5 is my top 5 Nickelodeon shows of all time. Starting with number 5, Double Dare. I am a massive sucker for Double Dare. I absolutely adore that game show. It mixes my love of trivia and my love for physical challenges all into one big sloppy mess. All of the different iterations of Double Dare I love. Even when Mark Summers is not hosting the show, I still enjoy the show. It's crazy. There's not many other game shows I can think about that, if you remove the host, I would still want to watch the content of the show. It just doesn't happen. I think the only times I've ever really accepted a new host into my life has been The Price is Right and Double Dare. Those are the only two that I can think of. Now, if you have never watched Double Dare, it's one of those shows that just you can throw on any year, any time, any episode, and it's just worth watching. That's why I threw it at number 5. There are so many other shows I do love, but then there's like seasons and certain episodes I wouldn't put on, and I can't really say that about Double Dare. It's a Nickelodeon show that I could put on any episode from the show's history, and I would love watching it. So with that in mind, on to number 4, The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius. I, once again, absolutely adore this show, but in terms of just animation, design, writing, consistency, Jimmy Neutron stands among some of the best when it comes to Nickelodeon shows, and even of the Nicktoons lineup. Given that whole part of like not wanting to put on certain episodes, there were other Nicktoons I was thinking about where maybe certain seasons or certain episodes I may enjoy more than Jimmy Neutron or might want to put on. But in terms of the entire series, putting that up against shows like The Fairly OddParents, I mean, there's entire seasons of The Fairly OddParents I wouldn't really want to watch. There's not many of that of Jimmy Neutron that I could say, so I had to give it that best of edge, and it's certainly the same edge I gave to Double Dare, given like, well, if there's not many episodes I wouldn't watch, I kind of have to put it up on this list. If you have never watched Jimmy Neutron, it's one of those shows that other than episodes that connect to previous episodes, there weren't many serialized episodes like that, but this is one of the best shows that has stood the test of time on Nickelodeon. There have been some that, you know, with some age maybe don't look as good as they once did, but Jimmy Neutron, like a fine wine, gets better year after year. Number 3 is Danny Phantom. Butch Hartman's second animated show on Nickelodeon, to me, is also his best. I love how iconic Cosmo and Wanda are, but in terms of a television show, in terms of what I like watching, Danny Phantom just checked all of the boxes off. It was a more serialized show in which moments and character interactions that happen in one episode directly connect to future episodes of the show. You do have to pay attention. Maybe not episode to episode, but moments like Jazz finding out that Danny is a ghost and withholding that information from him come into play in future big events. Moments with other characters that happen get callbacks in future episodes. The characters actually grow, and by the end, it might not be the greatest finale in the world, but it gave us a very satisfying conclusion, one that we don't really get to have with many Nicktoons. And it's just a show that in many rewatches I've like loved more and more, like time and time again. Number 2 is Hey Arnold, a show that, although is number 2 on this list, I will have no problem saying and dying on the hill that it is one of, if not the greatest television animated program ever in our society, in our culture, in American television screens. Hey Arnold, to me, stands above the rest in a certain level of quality that, honestly, I don't think any show since have they've attempted to reach that bar, but I don't think any show since has even come close to crossing. And I it's really hard to put into words exactly how I feel about Hey Arnold, but I've said time and time again, it's a show that I've always wanted to host a TED Talk about, to really give words as to why I think it's just the greatest of all time. It's the GOAT in terms of children's animation. A show so optimistic but so earnest in what it told kids. It brought light to children, different lives that other kids could have around the world and the situations they could be put in. It showed off different races and classes before any other show was bringing attention to those things. They didn't have to beat you over the head with what the messages it was trying to bring to you. They just presented it in an honest way that I think, although many kids wouldn't be able to verbally say they respected, I think that the show resonated with more people than you think. And I honestly believe that even if there are those out there who wouldn't remember Hey Arnold or really say that, oh yeah, this had a profound effect on me, I do believe that Hey Arnold presented ideas of the world that helped bring a lot of children not closure, but an understanding of. And even if they don't remember or give credit to Hey Arnold, I feel like it had to have had a profound effect with some of the themes that it brought to screens. And even since then, some of the elements of it that have been a bit more dissected, and it just, I could talk about Hey Arnold till the cows come home. I could talk about Hey Arnold so much so that I wish I did a Hey Arnold podcast in the same vein of the Squarecast, but that honestly needs a little bit more work done to it, because Hey Arnold is very special to me and should be presented as such to the rest of the world. If you have never watched Hey Arnold, it's 100 episodes. I don't care that it's 5 seasons long. It is worth watching from beginning to end, including the movie, including the Jungle movie. Spend some time, binge some episodes of Hey Arnold, especially in that first season. Maybe you just don't remember just how real that show got at times. Some of the themes that they presented, like, if you're an adult and you don't remember what Hey Arnold covered through your childhood, go back and watch. I think you'll be really surprised about that. And, of course, my number one show of Nickelodeon, if you're a Captain Eric fan whatsoever, this should come fairly obvious, as I have an entirely other podcast devoted to this character and show. That is, of course, Spongebob Squarepants. It's weird, as I brought up all of these shows of, like, oh, there's certain seasons I really wouldn't watch. There's a lot of, like, older seasons of SpongeBob, some of the, like, newer ones, quote unquote. When I say, like, older, the seasons I always put on and binge are the first few seasons, as most of you probably do. But it is a show that is just, the quality has not wore off. Like, it is the most beautiful vase that just hasn't had a speck of dust on it in like 20 years, and it's all because of those early seasons to me. I don't know why. It's so sublime how good this show is after all this time. But even with episodes I haven't watched of SpongeBob, the whole point of that podcast was kind of to give me a reason to go through the show in order and eventually get to episodes I haven't watched, and then give you my fresh takes on these episodes that I'm watching for the first time. It kind of sucks going through these original first few seasons because the quality of the show is so good. Therefore, my show is literally just kind of regurgitating how awesome they are. But eventually we will get to episodes I may not like as much, and it'll be interesting to see how my taste in SpongeBob from those early seasons evolves with these newer episodes that I'm watching. So I know I just basically plugged that show, but that really wasn't the point of this whole thing. But yeah, SpongeBob SquarePants is my absolutely favorite Nickelodeon show, bar none. The character means more to me, more to its connection to me for anyone around the world. I could wear a SpongeBob shirt to any other country out there, and there's going to be some kid or some person who knows that character from a completely different language and background, and we immediately could have just a one moment connection, and that to me is just so beautiful. I love that. The character has meant so much to me in even a profound way, given that it was this show that gave me the idea to want to work in entertainment, work in animation, to have the desire to even want to grow up and be around the things that I love. So the character means so much to me in so many different ways, and I owe a lot to Steven Hillenburg and the crew that worked on that show from beginning to even now. Even if you're starting day one at SpongeBob SquarePants, I absolutely love you. Thank you for the work you're going to be putting in. I love that this show gets to continue on 20 plus years later, entertain more generations of kids. And I love that I'm going to be 80 or 90 years old one day, and there's still going to be people who get the SpongeBob quotes like chocolate and hoopla and things like that. So 20 years later, and the character is as popular as ever, and shows no signs of slowing down anytime soon. And with that, that is Captain Eric's top 5 of this week in Nickelodeon history. If you enjoy this podcast and would like to show some support, here's the thing. I never ask for anyone's money. I'm a captain. I don't need your money. What I do need is just your support. So if you're listening, hey, I love that. If you can share this podcast to anybody who you think may enjoy this podcast, that is extremely helpful. Or if you are a listener on YouTube, if you could subscribe to the Captain Eric YouTube channel and like this video, those are just as helpful. And all of that could take mere seconds. So if you are a part of what I call my Ready Crew, which is pretty much my fan base, if you will, if you're a part of the Ready Crew, welcome aboard. You are much appreciated. And as always, my name is Captain Eric, and thank you for listening to This Week in Nickelodeon History. As far as the future releases of this show, future episodes of the show, other than the next one, will be released on Sundays of the week that we will be talking about. Of course, this first episode being released on a Friday on April 1st to coincide with Nickelodeon's birthday will set things up for a bit of a bumpy start, but then by episode 3 we should settle in to the Sunday release dates, and all future episodes of the show will then release on the Sunday the week of that we will be covering. So, as always, my name is Captain Eric, and thank you for listening to This Week in Nickelodeon History.
On the Lord Hut, here we hut, Nick. On the Lord Hut, here we hut, Nick, Nick. On the Ricky Ticky Low, while living #1 Nickelodeon.